Welcome to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita. I'm your host, and today we are going to be exploring a very powerful question. What stories are we handing down to our children, and how are those stories really shaping their sense of self? And so today I want to talk about how growing up in a South Asian household, there are stories that we just don't hear. Dads aren't usually the ones that are comforting us, boys don't cook. And if you're caught between two different cultures or dealing with something really strong like grief, you're expected to just push through. But what if we told our children different stories? And that's what today's episode's about. We are talking to Meera Sriram, and she has written some beautiful children's books that reimagine what it really means to grow up South Asian American. And it shows us dads who forgive, boys who are gentle and curious, and kids who are allowed to feel very deeply and fully belong, even when they're straddling two different worlds. And why is it important to change these stories? Because that's where that real transformation begins. Picture books and storybooks are the essential tools in helping children develop their bicultural identity because they serve as these mirrors, these windows, and then these bridges. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. Mirrors are where we get to affirm ourselves and our culture because we see ourselves in these storybooks and it represents who we are in the world. We see people who look like us, they eat food like us, they dress like us, they may speak our language, and it affirms that our background really does matter and is worth celebrating and looking at. And it validates us, right? This is especially powerful in a society where you feel like your culture is just not represented or understood. So, picture books can help us normalize bicultural identity, showing that both being South Asian and being American is not only possible, but it's very, very powerful. Now, the next one I want to talk about is how we serve as windows. And that helps us understand others and navigate between the differences that we see. So, bicultural children are constantly navigating between their culture and that mainstream culture that's out there in the world. And storybooks can serve as a guide to help them understand, to help them compare what someone else is going through versus what they're going through, and then really synthesize both of those experiences, right? And so they learn that they're not alone when they're juggling Diwali and then dressing up in costume for Halloween, eating roti and then eating pizza at birthday parties, or speaking Bengali at home and then speaking English out in the world. Because again, books help us build that confidence in handling this idea of code switching and working within dual traditions. The last one I want to really talk about is the bridges. So, building empathy and communication is going to be so important for bicultural children. This is where we can help bridge and start conversations with other peers, to explain what their identity looks like at home, with their teachers, with their family members. These stories help to articulate and communicate their experiences and really strengthen their pride in who they are and give them an understanding of what that looks like across generations, really, especially with immigrant parents who may not have had the same resources growing up. Now, combating stereotypes and expanding representation is also going to be really important. Too often, South Asian characters are either missing or they're portrayed like a stereotype. When you think about films and movies and TV shows, we look at high quality picture books. This is going to allow for more nuanced, joyful, and complex portrayals of what it means to be South Asian American in real life. So they are going to push back against creating characters that represent the model minority stereotype or are always dressed in ethnic clothing so that children can really see the full range of what it means to be South Asian American. Now, encouraging emotional development and resilience. This is one of my favorite topics. And so bicultural children are going to sometimes face these microaggressions. They're going to be confused about their identity, maybe shameful of, I know when I was growing up, bringing food to school and not being able to explain what it was. And so stories about kids like them navigating similar emotions, whether it's grief, pride, curiosity, embarrassment. This helps them develop that emotional vocabulary so they can really explain and identify their emotions and then be able to cope with them. And it provides them with coping tools. So they also show children that bicultural identity isn't a burden, but it's a superpower, and they have navigated some really tough terrain. So today we're going to explore how Mira's childhood really shaped the stories that she writes today, the way her own parenting journey informs the characters that she brings to life, and how stories can really be a powerful tool to challenge those stereotypes that exist in our world and celebrate our children in all of their nuances and complexities. So when we come back, we are going to meet with author Meera Sriram. I'd like to introduce Meera, who is an award-winning author. Her picture books include A Gift for Amma, Market Day in India, which won a South Asia Book Award, Dumpling Day, featured in the New York Times, A Garden in My Hand, which was shortlisted for the SCBWI Crystal Kite, and The Spice Box, a Kaliba Golden Poppy Award finalist. Meera draws from her life straddling the East and the West to tell her stories. She grew up in India and moved to the United States at the turn of the millennium. An electrical engineer in the past, she now writes for children and advocates for diversifying bookshelves. Meera felt compelled to tell her stories when she noticed children that looked like her own, as well as immigrant and cross cultural experiences, were missing in the stories her family was reading. Mira's books strive to offer representation, tackle difficult topics, break stereotypes, and open up conversations among caregivers, educators, and children of all backgrounds. All right, Meera, welcome to our show. I'm so excited to have you. I've been lucky to get to listen to you talk about some of your books at the author events that we've been a part of. And I love learning from you about just the background and how you thought up some of these concepts and themes that you really represent in the stories that you share. So I wanted to start with your story first. So just if you could tell us a little bit about how you became a children's book author and some of the experiences that led to that.
So great to be here having this conversation with you, Amita. Thank you so much for having me. And it's
Yeah.
been wonderful crossing paths with you at all these kidlit events and to listen
Yeah.
to you read your book and bring in the same kind of passion and purpose to your writing as well. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a city called Chennai in the south of India.
Hmm.
And I immigrated to the United States as an adult when I was 23 years old.
Mhm.
Growing up, I had very little access to picture books in the form and definition that we are used to today. So we read books, but they
Mhm.
were not necessarily picture books in the format that we see today.
Yeah.
And there were two kinds of literature that I primarily was exposed to. One was from the West. So we read classics, Shakespeare, Charles Dickens,
Mm.
and also novels from the UK and America, like the I'm sorry, the detective novels
Oh
like
yeah.
Nancy Drew and
Uh-huh.
Hardy Boys and Famous Five and all of that. And then the other kind of books was all the stories that were rooted in mythology. So like Amar Chitra Katha and
Oh yeah.
Jataka tales, which had talking animals and forests. And we also read a lot of
Hmm.
folk tales.
Oh.
Uh, so where I'm getting at is to
Hmm.
say that I did not see myself or
Yeah.
my life represented in the books that I was reading. So this was back in the 80s
Yeah.
in India, right?
Mm.
So I did not see stories that had an urban household, like kids growing up in the city or going to schools like that I did, uh, you know. So fast forward, and I'm in the US. I have my first child when
Yeah.
my daughter was born. I went to the children's section in the library, and my journey kind of started from there.
Yeah.
So, my first picture book or my exposure to picture books was when I was 28 years old. I was blown away by the power of the medium, how transformative it was, the aesthetics of picture books, the
Yeah.
themes that they encompassed.
Hmm.
It was my number one parenting tool,
Hmm.
especially as an immigrant mom raising kids across cultures. So
Yeah.
we devoured a lot of board books and picture books. We read about fairies and
Uh,
unicorns and
yeah.
dogs and cats and all of that.
Yeah.
But eventually, I started noticing something. I realized that some of our stories were missing. So when I say some of our stories, I mean um, stories that had children of color or centered around their identity or their experiences growing up across cultures or being raised by immigrant parents. So
Mm.
I started thinking about everything that were missing in the pages of the books that we were reading. And that started to bother me so much that I decided to quit my job as an electrical engineer and
Wow.
decided to follow my heart. I wanted to be part of the change that I longed to see in children's literature for
Yeah.
kids like my own. And that's sort of how my journey in children's
Yeah.
literature started in the US.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's powerful. That theme that kind of kept coming up, not getting to see yourself growing up in the books in India, coming
right,
to the US, and
right,
then having your own kids, and
right.
then again, not seeing them in the books that you were reading or their stories, and talking through all the other stories that you were reading, right? And not again seeing your own narrative in there.
Right.
And so it seems like a calling, really, this power that was within you that you were able to take and start. How was the process of getting started? Was there a high learning curve going into this new field as an author?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
There were so many odds that were stacked against me.
Yeah.
I did not grow up here.
Yeah.
So obviously, I did not grow up reading the classics and the picture books.
Yeah.
English was not my native language or my
Hmm.
first language. I did not have a background in humanities or a degree in creative writing
Yeah.
or a master in fine arts, none of that. I had no idea how these books were put on bookshelves in libraries and bookstores.
Hmm.
So I started first blogging about the books that I saw myself gravitating towards, the kind of
Hmm.
stories that I saw myself in, the
Yeah.
kind of stories that I aspired to write first. So that was like the starting point. And then a little bit of, not a little bit, a lot of research
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
who created the story, how was the art done, who published the story, and then just learning about the industry, going to conferences, workshop, networking. One thing that really helped me was growing up in a family that loved words. So
Hmm.
my parents were voracious readers.
Ah, that's
There
nice.
were always books
Yeah.
around me. And we loved word games and
Hmm.
playing Scrabble and doing crosswords. So I always had an
Yeah.
intrinsic love for words, even
Hmm.
though I loved the sciences and I really wanted to become an engineer. So my parents were
Yeah.
not one of those parents who pressured us into following a particular profession, but
Yeah.
they were open-minded and they nurtured whatever we were passionate about.
Hmm.
So I chose to become an engineer. I still love the sciences,
Yeah.
but I also have this love for words, and that sort of
Yeah.
helped me um, follow my dream in my creativity and creating for children. So
Yeah. Oh,
I
that's great.
started.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the themes that show up in your books because now that you tell me you're an engineer, I do see how, it kind of intersects with your writing because you do see these problems that are out there in the world and you challenge them, right? So when you think about gender stereotypes, and I remember this last event we were at and you read your book, The Spice Box. And there was a boy that was there that was just so intrigued by the box and the story because there was a boy cooking in the story and that was the main character and the boy cooks, not the girl. And you spoke a little bit about that. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the gender stereotypes and how you are able to challenge them in the stories that you write.
Thank you for noticing that and acknowledging all of that
Yeah.
because all of those choices were very intentional.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up around a lot of patriarchy, as
Yeah.
it is in most South Asian communities and
Hmm.
cultures, um, and and that's the stark qualities that sort of upheld patriarchy
Yeah.
include gender norms or
Hmm.
gender stereotypes or roles that are typically associated with a particular gender.
Hmm.
And I wanted to shift that in my stories
Yeah.
as much as I could.
Hmm.
Obviously, needs to fit into the narrative.
Yeah.
But if there was an opportunity, then I wanted to grab that. So I'm always intentional about the choices I make when it comes to portraying characters in my story.
Yeah.
And the reason that I think it was important for me to break those stereotypes are actually twofold. One is like it, first of all, affirms
Hmm.
it for so many boys who love cooking, for so many
Yeah.
dads who love cooking.
Yeah.
So, one of the harmful effects of stereotyping is that even within our culture,
Hmm.
there are certain people who fall through the cracks, right?
Hmm.
Who are in the margins, who don't get to see themselves in the stories, like my son who loves to cook, or my husband
Yeah.
who's a better cook than me and who
Yeah.
loves grocery shopping and looking up recipes and experimenting with
Yeah.
all the recipes that he comes across. So even within our culture, the stereotypes can be harmful because we leave out these people who never
Yeah.
get seen in the stories
And
that they
and they
read.
feel shut down. They feel like a lot of boys I know just don't want to go to the kitchen because they feel like the parents will say, "Why are you there? This is not your role. You don't need to be doing this. Go spend time
Absolutely,
doing something
exactly.
else." Yeah.
So it affirms, it's a huge affirmation for
Hmm.
boys who love to cook and dads who love to cook. But also, we want people to start noticing this, to start shifting from this expectation, gender
Yeah.
expectation.
Hmm.
Maybe a dad reads the book and starts reflecting and
Yeah.
wants to start cooking with his son. Or, like you
Yeah.
said, maybe a
Hmm.
boy is not shy anymore to go into the kitchen and do what he loves. Or maybe a dad and boy bond over cooking in the
Yeah.
kitchen. So we also want to normalize this
Hmm.
through stories.
Yeah.
So I try my best to sort of shatter these stereotypes
Hmm.
so people get to see themselves, as also to make it more intentional for those who who have not who haven't seen this normalized in stories.
Yeah, yeah. Because, yeah, you talk about this gender socialization process for boys and how they're learning about their gender and what they can or can't do. And they're reading stories, and either it's reaffirming a stereotype or combating that stereotype. And then you
Right,
talk about dads, right? Because you were talking about how dads can then feel like they can go into the kitchen and cook with their sons because for fathers who have been socialized within our culture for so many years to
right,
not share emotion, to not cook, to not do
right,
things that are traditionally seen as very female,
right,
I think that's again something your books are also kind of deconstructing because I remember in that story, I think it looked like the father was going to get really mad at the son for dropping the spice box.
right,
And you see this, and I remember thinking this because I'm like, all the dads, even when you look at Bollywood movies, they're very strict, they're very angry. And then
right,
you show this forgiving father.
right, right.
And I love that. And I just want for you to talk a little bit about that and how your books can really help fathers maybe communicate with their children, and be more emotionally open with them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, growing up, I saw a lot of dads,
Hmm.
men,
Yeah.
who were mostly decision makers. So
Hmm.
they were sort of leaders and they
Yeah.
were providers. So they would cater to needs in the family, or they would provide,
Yeah.
and they would make the final call on how we spend money or what we did, as a family. And this was like something that was normalized at
Hmm.
work. I saw men who behave like this, my uncles in the neighborhood, in the
Yeah.
media, in news, in movies, like you said.
Yeah.
So we see them as decision makers and
Yeah.
leaders in
Hmm.
power.
Hmm.
The other interesting trait that I often came across was like funny dads. Like they were the ones who joked. So
Yeah.
even if there was an emotion, even if there was a
That's true.
conflict, it was always pushed aside with being funny
Yeah.
or, what we call mansplaining,
Mansplaining, yeah.
gaslighting, and all
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
right? We don't want to enter that black hole, but all
And
of that.
the mask that they wear is humor because they don't want to
Right,
be
right.
vulnerable. Yes.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
they were always funny,
Yeah.
or this funny uncle, and but they never. What I started realizing now that I look back is that I didn't see them empathize. I felt like
Hmm.
they lacked empathy,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
And that also led to not being expressive about their emotions,
Hmm.
both in body language or through words. Like, how do you
Yeah.
articulate love, right?
Yeah.
How do you step aside from power and
Mhm.
humor and actually empathize and
Yeah.
communicate your emotions? So that's one reason that I wanted to sort of like turn this thing on its head,
Yeah.
so to speak, in my stories. But the other thing is also that most often, as creators, when we write
Hmm.
stories, we are thinking about our own experiences. But then
Hmm.
the character and the story is happening today. So,
Yeah.
how have dads evolved? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure the dad I see today, like an Indian American dad that
Yeah.
is raising a 2 year old today, is not the dad that I grew up with.
Yeah. No,
Obviously,
yeah.
times have changed. So, we want to
Hmm.
offer mirrors for these dads because
Yes.
propagating the stereotype also means that we are regressing when kids today and families today are reading the book. So we want to
That's
be
so
honest
true.
in our reflection.
Yeah.
Even though we have baggage that we are carrying,
Yeah.
we want to also offer realistic mirrors for families that are picking up the book today.
Yes, I love that. It's
Yeah.
so true. That passive dad to the active dad that we have today.
Today, yes. So we want to
Yes.
acknowledge that. We
Yeah.
want to nurture that. We want to
Mhm.
champion that and not sort of like propagate these harmful stereotypes. So for these two reasons, I am very intentional about creating these characters, these dads who actually make mistakes. So in the Spice
Yeah.
Box, the dad is not the super chef.
Mhm.
He doesn't even know how to like use the spices. It ends up being too spicy or too bitter, and he makes mistakes and he
Yeah.
learns. And then when the
Yeah.
boy, his son, drops the box, he's like, "It's okay. We
Yeah.
got this. Let's fix it together." So
Yeah.
there's empathy there. He is showing
Hmm.
empathy. And in the Yellow Suitcase, which is a grief
Oh,
story
yes.
inspired by my own family's experience when
Uh-huh.
my children lost their first grandparent in India.
Yeah.
Before being a dad, they are humans. So
Hmm.
when there's loss,
Yeah.
they do have emotions, but do they express it? Do they articulate it? And I show the dad in the Yellow Suitcase actually
Hmm.
missing his mom and sharing his feelings with the daughter and
Yeah.
comforting her and being there for her to share in the grief to help her process the loss.
Yeah.
So we want to show these dads emote rather, right, and express
Yes.
and share feelings and being there
Hmm.
for their children in the way
Yeah.
that moms have always been portrayed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and same thing in Dumpling Day, I show
Hmm.
dads actually caregiving. So there's a
Oh.
dad holding a
Yeah.
baby with
Huh.
the bottle and feeding the baby with
Yeah.
milk. The dad's packing for picnic. So these are
Yeah.
things that we assume that moms do, and we don't
Yes.
want to sort of normalize that. We want to step us away from that and show dads who I'm sure are
Yes.
today packing for
Yeah.
picnics and taking care of kids and going on walks on a stroller. And we
Yeah.
want to uh, acknowledge that as well.
Yes, that is so important, especially like as you said, for future generations to continue and to understand and normalize, humanize. I
Right.
love all of that. And the other thing I noticed in the book, the same book, The Spice Box, was this idea of the curry. And you did talk a little bit about that at the last event that we were at, and how you are decolonizing this idea of curry because a lot of people, right, have this idea that everything that they eat that looks like a little bit yellowish reddish is curry. And I know even when it has a different names, we're limiting, first it's very narrow, we're limiting vocabulary for our own food items, like pav bhaji is now seen as a curry. We
Right.
see in Britain, right, their national dish is the chicken curry, the chicken
Yes.
tikka curry. So um, how are you helping us, just sort of be proud of our culture with the stories that you tell, how to be representative, to be authentic with our culture, and helping others really understand that.
Thank you for asking
Yeah.
that. Um, so when I moved to the US, food was a great way to connect with cultures. It was
Yeah.
such a wonderful thing to that brings people together.
Mm.
I exchanged recipes with my neighbors. We shared dinners together. I formed so many friendships with
Yeah.
food. So food is like a central theme in several of my books. And
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
always asking, why do you keep talking about food? Thing. Of course, we all love food, but also
Yes.
it allows us to access a culture pretty
Hmm.
easily. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, so when I first moved to the US, I was actually surprised to see there was racist language associated
Hmm.
with curry. Um, all the things that were told to me and even my kids in school. We I would pack dosas and idlis, so they ate with their hands mostly,
Yeah.
and be it eating with your hand
Hmm.
or your hand being smelly or the when you open your lunch box, there's this strong stench that fills the air. So there were all these negative
Yes.
connotations and associations with the curry, which really took me by surprise because
Hmm.
we grew up with so many different spices that brought in flavor and
Yeah.
color and
Hmm.
texture to our food. And there are so many different types of curry. So I was
Yeah.
like, what is this one curry powder on the shelf?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
what is the curry? I mean, there is a very specific curry powder that you make that my mom makes, which is completely different from the curry powder that
Hmm.
I'm used to in the West.
Yeah.
So what does it even have in it? So I was
Hmm.
curious, why is this always curry flavor and curry
Yeah.
powder and all these racist vocabulary associated with curry? And I wanted to challenge that.
Hmm.
I wanted to celebrate that
Hmm.
because this whole use of the singular narrative about curry
Yeah.
is something that has been passed on from our colonizers.
Yes.
I don't know because they didn't get it. Maybe it was too
Hmm.
nuanced. Maybe it was easy
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And that has become the standard now
Yeah.
in the West. And I wanted to challenge that and celebrate the curry,
Yeah.
the aroma, not the stink,
Hmm.
not the smell, the aroma. Like you open the
Yeah.
box and you just take in all the wonderful, rich, flavorful
Yes.
smells of the spices that go into the curry.
Yeah.
And in a way, it also is such a powerfully sensory experience that
Hmm.
takes us back to my roots, right? You through
Yeah.
food and through spices, you actually I can actually think of all the food that I grew up eating. It
Yeah.
takes me back to my grandma's kitchen. It connects me
Yeah.
back to my roots and my
Yes.
mom's recipes. So something that can be so powerful
Hmm.
and so wonderful cannot be
Yeah.
trivialized into something smelly and stinky.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and also, the curry that I talk about
Hmm.
in the book is a South Indian potato curry, which is very different from, say, a Bengali curry or a Marathi curry.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they all have specific names in the regional languages, but
Yeah.
for purposes of our conversation, there's no one curry. And
No.
there's so
Yeah.
much more beyond the chicken tikka masala, right?
Yeah.
I'm a vegetarian. I don't even eat chicken. So
Yeah.
people who stop me and say, "Hey, do you have the recipe for?" And I have to like tell them, "No,
Yeah.
I don't eat chicken tikka masala." And chicken tikka masala is from different part of India,
Yeah.
and the way we do a curry is very different. It's dry and it's not a gravy. So
Yeah.
bringing that awareness and nuance to the
Yes.
curry, the
Yeah.
layers that go into that is very, very important to me. So just in terms of cultural
Hmm.
awareness, just in terms of celebrating food traditions, just in terms of challenging the
Yeah.
existing narrative, the
Hmm.
negative narrative about curry. So, for all these reasons, uh, is why I wanted to talk about the spices and have the South Indian potato curry in the book and talk about a boy who's
Yeah.
enjoying the spices and wanting to cook
Yeah.
with this heirloom spice box.
And I thought that was so great when you explained the recipe at the end and you're like, here's the recipe of the South Indian potato curry. And you talked about that and the different regions and how curry is
Yes.
very diverse and there's
Yes.
so many different types of curries. Like Bengalis have egg curry and it is,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
more of a
Yeah.
gravy curry.
Right.
And
Right.
so I just love the way you explain that to children, in simple ways, but there was so much depth to the book and how you created it, why you created it. Yeah.
Schools, kids are excited to share the curry
Uh-huh.
that I ate that they ate last
Yeah.
morning, or
Yeah.
like that they brought have for lunch, or this is the
Uh-huh.
curry my grandma makes, and they see how it's
Yeah.
so much more nuanced and there's so much more dimension and variety to it.
Yeah.
So that's very powerful, and for them to get excited about curry.
Yeah.
And I when I was a kid, like we would actually smell the inside of our palms and say like, "Oh,
Hmm.
we ate this." That was a good thing
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
eating with the hand is important for so many different reasons. I could talk about it, like a whole lot. But there's a reason, there's a
Yeah.
rationale behind all of this, and not that one is superior than the other or anything, but to each his own, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of why I wanted to
Yeah.
normalize the curry and celebrate it in the book.
Yeah. And so when you think about, if I was to ask you about advice for bicultural families trying to preserve traditions, cooking is definitely one that we just talked about.
Right.
But yeah, and like explain maybe explaining it to them, and you just talked about eating with your hands. That could be another way, right, to preserve tradition, like communicating some of the things that we do in our culture. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about ways we can try to preserve the traditions that our families hold?
So I have a slightly different approach to that.
Yeah.
So as much as preserving a tradition is important, I
Yeah.
also think traditions are meant to evolve.
Yes.
So
I
there is
agree.
no
Hmm.
one right or wrong way, or like I said, one is
Hmm.
superior, one is inferior.
Yeah.
Each family could come up with their own tradition,
I love that. Yeah.
and authenticity,
Hmm.
right? And I think learning about how a certain thing is done
Yeah.
in different ways, in
Hmm.
different cultures, in different communities, in different parts of the world, essentially enriches our own understanding of why we do things a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some people use chopsticks, some people eat forks, some people
Hmm.
eat with a spoon, some people eat with their hand,
Yeah.
like some people share food from the same plate,
Hmm.
communal eating. So they're
Yeah.
learning about
That's
all
true.
of
Yeah.
these also
Hmm.
reinforces why we do things a certain way,
Hmm.
for kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe in opening up the world for our children before I even shove a particular tradition down their throat.
Yes.
So
Okay. I love that. Yeah.
then there's the deeper understanding
Hmm.
of why are we doing this?
Hmm. Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
is not any less than a different way or any better than the other way.
Yeah.
And then that makes it a little more easier for them to accept it and
Yeah.
follow
Yeah.
the tradition or celebrate the tradition with joy. And I think
Yeah.
it also came from my own parents.
Hmm.
Like, I remember growing up on Diwali,
Hmm.
all the my relatives and families in our neighborhood would cook for hours this traditional meal that
Yeah.
they would all sit together and enjoy.
Hmm.
It was usually a big breakfast and then again a big lunch, and there were all these specific dishes
Yeah.
due. But interestingly, all through my childhood, we always went out to eat on Diwali. The restaurants would be empty, trust me,
Yeah.
and we would be the only family enjoying the meal.
Yeah.
My mom was a working mom, and she
Hmm.
always woke up like five-ish or six-ish and
Wow.
packed
Yeah.
boxes for us. She had to take
Uh-huh.
the bus to work. She
Wow.
came
Yeah.
back, and because of
Hmm.
patriarchy again, she was the one who would like make dinner again. So for her, she would always look forward to Diwali when she didn't have to enter the
Yeah.
kitchen. And
Yeah.
so that was our tradition. So for
Hmm.
me, Diwali meant going out to eat, which was also a very rare
Yeah.
event in our
Hmm.
family in the 80s. So and I still cherish it. So sometimes coming up with our own traditions, and I always talk about it after I read Garden in My Hands, which celebrates the custom of henna,
Yeah.
or the Spice Box, which centers a food tradition.
Uh-huh.
A tradition could be something that's passed down from generations. It
Yeah.
could be ancient. It could be something special in your family across generations, or it could be something that you come up with today.
Yeah.
But it needs to make sense to you. It needs to bring joy. So that you can actually sustain that. So for example, for Christmas, we are not Christians, and
Yeah.
we don't celebrate Christmas in the traditional sense.
Hmm.
But we love the holiday spirit and we want to be part of it. So
Yeah.
every year we come up with a different theme for a tree. So there's been a book
Mm.
tree once.
Oh,
There's
that's
been
cute.
a world tree once.
Yeah.
There's been an identity tree once where we share snippets of us through the ornaments, like what we pick, like what we like, and what
Oh, okay.
defines
I was going to
us.
ask you that. Like, what does the identity one look like?
Yeah, like
Okay.
whatever you think
What
defines
represents you?
you.
Like each
Yes,
member
what
of the
represents
family
you. It could
picks
be
something.
dance, it could
Okay.
be food,
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like what is special to you? What do you think
Yeah.
you want to talk about yourself? So we have done different, or sometimes it's like a fabric tree that we like
That's so
whatever,
cool.
like arts
Yeah.
and crafts. So that's our tradition to
Yeah.
come up with a different tree, but the spirit, the
Yes.
heart, what it's at its
Uh-huh.
core is the same, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's my take on traditions, and what affirms these practices for us is more about what
Yes.
brings us joy, what brings us meaning,
Hmm.
more than
Yeah.
trying to preserve it in its original uh,
Yeah.
form.
So I will tell you, like that definitely resonates with me because when I wrote my holy book and Diwali book,
Uh-huh,
trying to
uh-huh.
write preserve, but also kind of show how we're celebrating it in America, what are the things we do. But with Rocky, I really took it a step further and looked at the ways in which siblings that could be two girls or two boys, right, can
Yeah,
celebrate
yeah,
Rocky and how it's evolving, how children are maybe mailing Rockies to their cousins if they don't live near them. And that has really, I feel like hit home with so many families where now I'm seeing people say, "Hey, can you sign this to my two sons?" And hopefully
uh-huh.
they protect each other like Queen Shanti and King Raj do. And it's so
Beautiful.
heartwarming to feel, see that it's the spirit, it's what's keeping them alive. Like what the tradition is kept alive because they are believing in it. They're trying to figure out ways to create that emotional safety, that security, protection. And so, my books have been about the celebrations, but I also wanted to touch upon the importance of South Asian representation in like everyday stories, like
Right.
you did with A Garden in My Hand, and why it's also powerful. Because for me growing up, again, I didn't also have books, so I did the festivals, but I know it is so important to also see South Asians in just everyday stories that maybe don't necessarily have to be with this is your specific culture, and that's why we're representing you in this book.
Right, right. Absolutely. We need all types of
Yeah.
stories, right? I believe in reading stories that encompass the whole gamut of our
Yeah.
experiences. So that shows the whole range of our experiences,
Yeah.
be it an immigrant story or a grief
Yeah.
story, or maybe story set in India or in the diaspora. Um,
Hmm.
so looking at our experiences through all sorts of lenses is important to make us whole. So we are
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
just stuck
Hmm.
in holiday traditions or in achievement stories,
Yeah.
or in immigration stories or trauma stories, but to
Yeah.
sort of
Hmm.
to look at us through the whole gamut of our experiences.
Yeah.
And that includes everyday stories where identity doesn't have to be part of the plot.
Yes.
It could be about a child who happens to be of South Asian
Yeah.
descent
Yeah.
or heritage, but just a story with a dog or a cat,
Hmm.
or maybe a friendship story, or maybe a
Yeah.
horror story, or a mystery story. It could be anything. And we deserve that, rightfully
Yes, yes. I
so,
feel like that
right?
helps with the bicultural identity and belonging, right? Because you're not feeling like pushed or pulled in like I'm South Asian today because I'm celebrating Diwali, and then now I went back to being American
Right,
because
right,
I'm going to school and trying to live my life in mainstream culture. But
right, right.
these stories accurately represent an authentic version of who we.
Yes, because
Yeah.
like I said, what is being authentic, right? How does an American kid look, or what
Yeah.
it is, what does it mean to look like an Indian American? Like, I
Hmm.
don't have an answer to that,
Yeah.
right? So, the beautiful thing is you can create your own worlds, you can create your own traditions, you can create your own culture, which is unique to you, which is very distinct to you, and that
Yeah.
is so liberating and powerful.
Yeah.
And we want to see all of those in our stories, which is
Hmm.
why these everyday stories are important because it affirms whatever you have chosen to do. It affirms your place in the world. It makes
Yeah.
you, it means that you are part of this bigger world, and yet you are unique in your own way.
Yeah.
And it brings joy. It
Yeah.
boosts your self-esteem.
Hmm.
And it's also important because it allows you to reimagine.
Yeah.
Um, if, like we talked about the dad, so if a dad who's not,
Yeah.
been cooking or whatever, but
Yeah.
has always wanted to cook, and
Yeah.
then they can reimagine maybe sharing roles differently. So it opens up that
Hmm.
conversation,
Yeah.
or even problem solving, where, like I said, where identity is not the plot, and you see a South Asian
Yeah.
American kid being an artist, and then if a child wants to become an artist or has
Yeah.
always dreamed, then to reimagine that world, it allows them to
Yeah.
do that. So for all these reasons, it's really important that
Yes.
we offer representation. Again, I always say authentic within quotes, like,
Yeah.
as long as there's honesty, there's truth, it's factually correct, then it is
Yeah.
authentic
I
because
love, yeah, I
we
love
get to
this
choose
idea
how
of,
we want to define ourselves.
yeah, reimagining. I love that idea
Right.
of just reimagining what it could be like because I know when I talk to my students and we talk about careers and you think about the role gender has played, a lot of them say that they wouldn't have, imagined themselves in certain careers and maybe they are in the career that they're choosing because, and we talk about like the toys that they played with, the books that they read, the messages they were told from their parents or teachers have basically shaped them into the career that they are a part of. But imagine
Right.
having read a book about, an woman engineer or
Yes.
astronaut or things like
Yes.
that
Yes.
allow
Right.
for you to think about your life in a different way.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I'd love, I mean, we talked about so many things. We've talked about gender stereotypes and fathers and how they can emotionally connect with kids, decolonizing the curry. I'd love for you to just end with any advice you have for parents that are choosing books right now for their children, that what are some things to look for to help them with, you talked about joy and identity and self-esteem and any tips there?
Right. I would say be very intentional, first of all,
Okay.
when you're choosing books. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be about a holiday, or
Yes.
don't
Hmm.
be limit yourself to
Yeah.
certain narratives,
Hmm.
right? So you want to include books that inform,
Yeah.
maybe about a holiday or about a biography, like about a person,
Yeah.
a biography maybe, or you want to pick books that affirm maybe the physicality, about the
Yeah.
color of your skin or eyes or hair.
Hmm.
Um, you want books that bring joy. You want
Yeah.
brings where identity is not part of the plot. So you want
Hmm.
all sorts of narratives
Yes.
that you want. But another thing that I would say is for South Asian parents, it um, also don't limit yourself to reading only about your
Yes.
culture. Like I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
open up the world. There are always different ways of looking at the same thing, and that would help us rationalize why
Hmm.
your own culture is a certain way,
Yeah.
and that would also build confidence in kids, and and make them secure enough to think that there are all these ways, and this is just
Yeah.
one other way of doing it. Um, so diversify your bookshelf, read stories from
Yeah.
around the world. I also think sometimes the literature in the US can be very insular. So
Hmm.
pick up stories that are set in cultures and communities and countries
Yeah.
outside of the US, outside of your own.
Yes. That's a
Yeah,
good
so these are
point.
some, and then
Yeah.
always talk about it, right? Like
Yeah.
have a conversation about something that reading about for the first time, or something that allows you to reflect. Just pause and have a conversation,
Yeah.
however uncomfortable it is, right?
Yes. Even the difficult conversations, like with the yellow suitcase, like if your
Yes,
family's going through grief, and death is something that's so hard for parents to talk about.
right,
This
right.
opens the door for those questions for children to ask and for
Yes,
parents to
yes.
explain.
Yes, that's a
Yeah,
great way of approaching a picture book,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And picture books are so special because there's always someone who reads it aloud to a child, so it's also like a
yeah,
bonding experience. So
yeah.
they are such great conversation starters, especially in
Mm,
South Asian families, in South Asian communities where talking about difficult things
yeah,
is a little bit harder.
it is. Yeah.
So picture books can be a great way to open up those conversations. So
Oh, I love
be
that.
intentional, open up the world, and then talk about it.
Yes, I love that. Are there any favorite books that you would recommend, whether they're yours or uh,
Um,
that you've come across for South Asian parents, their children?
Oh, that's such a
Yeah.
hard question, right? For so many reasons.
Yeah.
First of all, there are so many great books out there.
Uh-huh.
And the needle is moving, even
Yeah.
though slowly. So we have so many options. We
I
just don't have
know.
this
There
one
is.
Bengali book
Yeah.
or this
Yeah.
one food book, but
Yeah.
there's like so many more books now to choose from. That's one reason why it's hard. Also because I have so many friends
I know.
who
Yeah.
create books, and
Yeah.
I'm so biased clearly when it
Yeah.
comes to their books. But I would say just some of my recent favorites,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to mention books of all my
Hmm.
peers or my author
Yeah.
friends because I
Yeah.
love them all and all their books. But some of the books that have
Mhm.
stood out, I read this book called "What Is Your Color, Baby?" What color is the baby? I think, yeah.
Oh,
What color is the
cute.
baby? It
Yeah.
was about colorism,
Oh.
and it was very
Oh,
powerful,
I
but
love that.
well done.
Yeah.
So I love that book.
Okay.
There is also The Moon from Dehradun by Shirin
Oh,
Shamsi.
I haven't read
It's
that.
about the partition,
Oh.
this Muslim family who moved from
Oh.
India
Wow.
to
Okay.
Pakistan,
Yeah.
to Lahore.
It's a picture
But
book?
it's a picture book.
Oh.
It's called The Moon from Dehradun by Shirin Shamsi, and I think it
Mhm.
was illustrated by Tarun Log.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another book. So there are these stories that can be
Yeah.
so profound and powerful, but then to see them in picture books now is so wonderful
Yeah.
for
Oh,
me.
that's
And,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's great.
stories by novels by Padma Venkatraman. She always writes very uh, powerful themes that she brings to her stories. I read Thirst by Varsha Bajaj that I loved. Yeah, so
Okay.
uh, I also read I Am Kavi. It's set
Oh.
in it's by Tushanti Ponvira, a Sri Lankan
Hmm.
author. So yeah, we need to read stories from
Yes.
not just India, but South Asia,
Yeah.
from all these countries, our neighbors. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
important too.
I know, because India does dominate that region, but there's,
Yes, so
right,
we have
so
to be
many
very
countries within
mindful
that South
about that.
Asia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yes. And Amira, are there any projects that you're currently working on right now?
I do have um, one book in the pipe
Oh,
that's scheduled to come out hopefully next year or the year after.
exciting.
It is a holiday book.
Oh,
But it's a fresh take on that again.
uh,
I believe I'm bringing some fresh perspective to it or a fresh
yeah,
take to it, inspired by my own family's experiences.
yeah,
So that's one, and then I'm also working on a couple of projects that I'm excited about.
yeah,
Just my own body of work that I'm building again. So that's kept me busy and just writing a lot.
yeah. Well, I'm excited for when your holiday book comes
Thank you for
out.
asking. Yes.
Yeah. And where can listeners connect with you if they'd like to stay in touch and have any questions for you?
Sure, I would love that. So they can connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
And they can also look up my website, which has information on all my books, where they're available, and there are blurbs and there are different resources for all the books. like
Is it your
coloring
name?
sheets
Is your
and
website your name
yeah.
or?
So my name, so my website is www.meerashriram.com. So
Okay,
my first name, last name.com.
perfect.
And then there's also a form on my website if they want to connect with me through my website. That's
Yeah.
also welcome.
Awesome. Mira, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, your own story of how you got started. Your own stories are giving so much voice to people, and the children's books that you write really help children feel seen and heard and their identities validated. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining. Remember, stories don't just entertain, they empower. And as South Asian parents, we have the opportunity to choose narratives that affirm, uplift, and challenge. Thank you so much to Meera Sriram for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Amit. It was great talking to you.